Well, hello everyone. My name is Brian Beck. I want to welcome you to our webinar today. I'm going to go through a few housekeeping items before we introduce our speakers. So today we're going to be talking about eliminating channel conflict on Amazon, shifting the world's #1 marketplace from a pain point to an opportunity. We have quite a few folks joining us today. For those of you who want a copy of this, we will be sending out a recording of the webinar after the event today. So don't worry so much about taking notes. You can reference it later and share it with members of your team. As well, if you have questions, please place them in the Q&A box. We'll get to as many of those as we go through the presentation today as we can. And again, feel free to ask those questions. We can't hear you, but we can see it. And if we don't get to your questions, we will respond to them after the event. So thank you again for joining us. My name is Brian Beck. I'm thrilled to be joined by two colleagues today who will let themselves introduce in a second. I am a managing partner of a company called Enceiba. We work with B2B brands, manufacturers, and some distributors on their Amazon strategy and programs. Myself, I come from 20 years in e-commerce, plus years, 25 now. A lot of that as an operator, vice president of e-commerce at Harbor Freight Tools and other companies through my career. I'm also the co-founder of a thought leadership series called Master B2B, which is a national, really in some ways global organization and network of B2B e-commerce professionals. And finally, I wrote a book called Billion Dollar B2B E-commerce, in which we have a whole chapter all about Amazon. So that's me. I'm kind of your host today. I'll be presenting a lot of the content along with two fantastic colleagues. I'm pleased to introduce Kyle Stroup from KJK. Kyle, you want to say hello and give a little bit of your background?
Certainly. Thanks, Brian, and thanks everyone for taking a minute to join us. I'm a partner at Kohrman Jackson Krantz here in Cleveland, Ohio. I focus my legal practice on protecting and promoting brands' reputations on the e-commerce marketplaces and enforcing their rights. I also spend a little bit of my time in the reputation management side of things, whether that's, negative press, publicity, reviews, what have you. At the end of the day, it all boils down to presenting a brand as best as possible online. And, today we're going to talk about channel conflict, and that's one crucial piece in all of that.
Awesome. Thanks, Kyle. Glad you're joining us today. Look forward to your what you've got to share. Michelle Dailing with VP of Operations with TrackStreet. Michelle, you want to say hello?
Hi, my name's Michelle. I have been in retail and retail operations for over 25 years. After I spent a lot of time on the brand side, I ended up on the agency side, specifically working with Amazon for many brands. And from there, I transitioned into brand protection and over to TrackStreet.
Awesome. And we'll talk about some of the cool things that both KJK and TrackStreet do as we go through this because it's directly applicable to our topic today. So, folks, we have a lot to cover. I'm going to go fairly quickly. We all are as we go through our sections here. Again, we're going to provide a copy of this recording, but here's what we're going to talk about. What is channel conflict? Why it happens on Amazon? What is the cost of some of that conflict? And what are the elements of a mitigation plan, which is the bulk of what we're going to talk about today? How do you address this issue of channel conflict and steps you can take? We'll have some time for Q&A, but please ask questions as we go through because this is intended to answer your questions about this topic. Why did we decide to talk about this? Well, yeah, we have hundreds of people that have registered for this event today, so we've clearly hit on a hot topic and why. So we do a survey at Enceiba every year, a pulse survey, and this is our survey for 2025. We ask questions about what are you dealing with Amazon, and the #1 thing that people said was the challenge. This is all B2B companies. They said their #1 challenge as it relates to selling on Amazon is channel conflict, 21%. And as you look at some of the other elements of challenge that people indicated, they all relate to channel conflict. Authorized resellers, 19%. Price erosion, 19%. This all has to do with channel control and conflict coming from Amazon. So we decided we wanted to put together a team here and talk about this with the community because ultimately it's a big issue, and we'll talk about the costs later. But let's first talk about what is channel conflict. So what is the how do we define it? This is from the authority on all things Wikipedia, but I think it's a pretty good definition. Channel conflict occurs when branded manufacturers disintermediate their channel partners, such as distributors, retailers, dealers, and sales representatives, by selling their products directly to buyers through general marketing methods and or over the internet. And the internet part of this is particularly important. And of course, we're going to talk about Amazon specifically here. But we also believe that channel conflict isn't necessarily just limited to manufacturers. In fact, it really a better and broader definition really is when any participant in the value chain disintermediates any portion of the value chain, including manufacturers and brands. How is this manifesting? Well, think about distributors and private label or retailers and private label product going directly to the buyer that maybe the manufacturer would be serving. So this isn't just limited to manufacturers, although today when we look at some of the participants in our call, we do have quite a few manufacturers here on the webinar. So, I credit this graphic here to my partner at the Master B2B series, Andy Hoare, when he was at Forrester. He put this graphic out, and I think it describes well kind of how channel dynamics have changed. This is a traditional sort of B2B flow of sort of product through the value chain. A branded manufacturer, in this case, Dry Ease, makes a product. This is a industrial dehumidifier and sells that to distribution. This is how the world has worked for, 150 or maybe 1,050 years, selling to a distributor like a Grainger, McMaster Carr, or Fastenal, who then in turn sells it to a B2B user, in this case, Service Master Clean, who then uses that item in the course of delivering a service in B2B. So, nice and clean every step of the way. The customer or there's value added to the buyer at the next step. We started seeing some branded manufacturers. That's what that little line there is, the brown line, showing, manufacturers started to sell directly a bit to ultimate buyers. That started happening a number of years ago, but it was still a fairly clean system. Now, oh my gosh, the world has changed. The dynamics have changed. And that same, branded manufacturer now has many different places and ways to sell. So those distributors have now become multi-channel distributors. Grainger, for example, gets more than 70% of its volume from digitally enabled channels. And so they've become an e-com player. Same thing with Fastenal, McMaster Carr, and if you go down the list of big distributors investing in e-commerce, you've got e-commerce pure plays. Zorro, for example, was launched by Grainger as a marketplace. So you have these sort of e-com pure plays, DrillSpot, others that have emerged. And then you also have marketplaces. And of course, the big example of that, we're going to talk about it today, is Amazon Business. And, the ultimate buyer ultimately, now has more choice on where to buy. Then you've got private label exclusives. You've got distributors acquiring suppliers. So the market has gotten very confused. And who is in more control than anyone? And I talk about this in my book, is the ultimate buyer. They are in control like never before. This happened in B2C retail for, over the last 20, 25 years. It's happened now in B2B as well, where that ultimate buyer has more pricing availability. They can see more. They have more buying options. They have more negotiating power. The power has shifted from the channel to the ultimate buyer. And of course, a big influencer here is Amazon. Amazon being a major disruptor, Amazon is now responsible for over 40% of US e-commerce. If you look on the right here, you see Prime households. Almost 70% of US households have a Prime membership within them. There are hundreds of millions of Prime members. It is the most successful loyalty program in the history of humankind. So, and this is so we can, on the consumer side, it's clear, and you all hear about this and read the headlines, but what's happening is not as much in headlines is B2B. Amazon is disrupting B2B. Make no mistake. This is not just pens and paper, folks. This is actual, B2B traditional products, MRO products, industrial products. And this is happening across, all these different industry categories. This year, Bank of America has the projection at $83 billion. Sanity check If you all know Grainger, Grainger's at about 17 billion total sales. This puts Amazon at, 4.5, 5 times the size of Grainger. And again, it's not just office supplies across all different kinds of categories. And Amazon, these volumes, guess what? They motivate resellers. This is some data. Thank you, Michelle, for this. This is some data from Statista that shows over 60% of sellers are selling is done by third-party resellers. And that was as of Q1 2025. This is driven by an ease of launching these accounts. Direct sellers, a lot of them coming from Asia, well-established best practices. Amazon makes this easy for folks to take product and put it on Amazon. And what exacerbates the issue is that manufacturers have not controlled this in many cases. So you have basically the world running wild here, resellers running wild. And what happens is this conflict is manifests in price. Channel conflict is largely centered on price and price control. So when you look at, why this is the case, there is a significant motivation for brands and manufacturers to go direct, right? And we know we have a lot of manufacturers here on the phone. I just wanted to kind of highlight the math, right? So there's powerful economic motivators. And if we look, I'm not going to read all these numbers for the sake of time. But the punchline of this slide is that when a company sells through a traditional channel, through wholesale distribution or to retail, or they're earning a wholesale margin on that product, right? You're earning, in this case, 12.5% of the ultimate retail price, $25 on a transaction that is ultimately a $200 transaction paid for by the end buyer. When a company goes direct, when a brand or manufacturer goes direct, they can make a significantly higher amount of dollars on the bottom line. In this case, 52%, $105 on a same $200 transaction. This same math applies in Amazon as well. So these are powerful economic motivators, and it's scary to the channel because ultimately they know this, and you as manufacturers, many of you know this as well. And one of the reasons why you haven't gone direct in many cases, but there's more margin, and so this economic potential is here. So this is one element we have to think about. And when Amazon is uncontrolled, it doesn't even have anything to do with the manufacturer. I'm picking on Milwaukee here. Sorry, Milwaukee, if you're on the line. I've been trying to reach you for a while to talk to you about this. Anyway, Milwaukee is a good example of what happens on Amazon. Aside from, even selling direct, just not having control of the channel. What happens when you allow the Amazon world to run on its own is that optimistic resellers who mainly compete on price will drive your price down. This Milwaukee product has 70 resellers on it. This dynamic drives pricing into the toilet. The prices on this product on Amazon range from what you see here, $71 to over $140. Where does Milwaukee actually want the product price? They probably have a MAP policy or something, or a retail list price, which is probably closer to $150, but it's being sold on Amazon for $71. How does this happen? Well, we're going to talk about all this. Conflict happens when Amazon is uncontrolled. And here's the sad state of affairs. Most brands do not know who is selling. We did this study with a company called Corvist a few years ago, and we asked B2B companies, are resellers selling your products on Amazon? Almost 70% say yes. Do you know who those resellers are? Over 70% say no. So we don't have control as an industry of what's going on here. And what happens in this is it drives price down. The other element is Vendor Central. Now, this is not a Vendor Central bashing session. There's two ways to sell on Amazon: Vendor Central, Seller Central. When you're selling in Vendor Central, it's a wholesale relationship with Amazon. They buy the product and Amazon sets the price. Well, that means you're not in control of the price. And Amazon is designed as to bring the best value. Remember, it's a marketplace. It is designed as a business to bring the best value to the customer. What does that mean? It means that Amazon is going to look to deliver the best price. Amazon will price match. And when you have channels, not only Amazon, but other channels outside of Amazon that are not controlled, this can be a downward spiral. If you look on the left-hand side, this is kind of a dynamic of what happens. Seller A being Amazon, seller B being someone else in the marketplace. I mean, this happens where you see one will price match the other. So Amazon and Walmart, for example, or in Amazon, you'll get resellers selling the product. Amazon owns the product in 1P. They drop the price to match the reseller. This has to do at its foundation with a lack of control. And it's not an indictment of Amazon's 1P selling method. It's really an indictment of your lack of product of channel control. It can lead to products what's called crapping out, cannot realize a profit in Vendor Central, which means Amazon stops buying the product. Amazon is also now all about profitability. And when you have this pricing dynamic occurring in Amazon, it can lead to very challenging vendor negotiations. They're not just going to accept lower margins because you don't have price control and you don't have channel control. They're going to push on you and ask you. So what does that do? Ultimately, it affects your profitability of a Vendor Central program. And some brands are looking to shift to other selling methods in order to gain control of this, which is fine. You just don't, number one, if you're looking at a shift in selling approach, we'll talk more about that later. You can't talk about price control to Amazon. I know we even have some Amazon folks on the call today, and I'm sure you'll reinforce this. This isn't about retail price control in terms of how you talk about it to Amazon. This is about you gaining better control of your channel and better managing your brand and presence and delivering a better customer experience to the Amazon customer. That's how you have to talk about it. So the other thing to know is that Amazon, or excuse me, conflict can be internal too. This isn't just about external elements. This can be a threat to your sales team, and selling directly on Amazon or other channels can be perceived as a threat to relationships, not just about price, but about the relationship between a seller of a product and a buyer of a product. Sales teams might also internally, you may have companies that are selling, or sales team members that are selling to companies that resell on Amazon. And if you're going to take control of this channel, you might take that volume away from that sales rep. You have internal conflict. And so you need to gain alignment around this, and we'll talk more about that later. Global companies can face, and we've dealt with this with a number of clients, can face complexities as it relates to internal controls. So, people selling product, for example, in some foreign country in Asia, a Chinese division or a Japanese division of a company selling to other resellers, and that product ends up making it onto Amazon US, even though it wasn't even bought and sold in the United States. So there's another level of complexity, and this all has to do with internal controls and management. So it's just another layer we wanted to throw out. So Michelle, would you talk to us a little bit about, the cost of conflict?
I'd love to. So the cost of conflict, it's significant, and there are both internal and external costs. And the first one is price undercutting and margin erosion. We all know that retail price degradation can happen when we have multiple sellers selling and we have no controls. And that can lead to issues in other channels due to lost sales to lower price channels. Legacy distributors and retail partners then in turn don't invest as much in the brands, and they have a reduced commitment to those brands in terms of either stock positioning or promotion of the brand, co-op marketing, to name a few. And that leads to lost sales and margins to opportunistic sellers and third-party sellers on marketplace platforms. Inconsistent customer experience and brand perception. When you have a lot of different people listing your items for different prices with different shipping times, with different images, it can impact consumer confidence, and it can lead to negative brand perception. Also, there are inventory management issues, either overstock in some channels, which can lead to understock in others, affecting how consumers shop for the items at their retailer of choice. And if those items aren't available, they may substitute them with a different brand, either temporarily or permanently. There are also some internal costs too that we just kind of talked about. There's the fear of preventing action on e-commerce, which the fear is often greater than the reality of the channel conflict. So, Brian, I think you did this survey, right? Where the fears that prevent people from selling on Amazon. And the one that's circled in red here is we don't want to cause conflict with our other sales channels. And 34% said that. But the challenge is if you're not present on Amazon in some capacity, either direct through Amazon 1P or 3P, or using a trusted third-party partner, it's almost guaranteed that someone else that you don't know is selling your brand in the channel anyway. Another highlight, 37% said that they didn't have the internal resources to properly manage the channel. The cost of doing nothing and not finding the right partners to help you manage the channel is too great to ignore anymore. Back about 12, 15 years ago, when I was still in the hair care industry, we kind of ignored it. Like, oh, we're not selling on Amazon. And some of our retailers who were e-commerce focused at the time said, but someone's selling on Amazon. And back then we were kind of able to throw our hands in the air and said, well, we don't know, and it's not us. And that no longer flies in today's retail. 13% said it's too complicated. There are experienced agencies and consultants like Brian that can help you create and execute best-in-class strategies.
So Julian Frere, thank you for your comment. We just got a comment in here, guys. And that's a good point. Julian said another danger is losing the buy box consistently on Amazon. It could create issues with the PDP, as winning the 3P reseller is given opportunity to control that PDP. So there's some content control risks and also profitability as we think about the cost of this. The same product sold through a third-party reseller is not typically as profitable and certainly not as high revenue to you as a brand as if you were selling it directly through your own selling account. So absolutely, that's just another cost, Julian. We probably could spend a whole webinar just talking about the cost. So what do you do about all this? What are the things that as a B2B practitioner, how do you get in and manage and control this? Well, I love to cite this book. I always do. If any of you have heard me speak before, Good to Great is from Jim Collins. If any of you have read it, one of the things he mentions is confronting the brutal reality of the situation. So, Michelle, we can't ignore it anymore. To your point, Amazon, it will control you if you don't control your own go-to-market presence, including on Amazon. So a proactive program is really the best approach, we believe, because look, we have to acknowledge that buyer channel preferences have shifted, B2C and B2B, and it's counterintuitive, but a directly managed Amazon channel can help reduce channel conflict. Not ignoring the channel, managing it, selling on it, controlling it. Retail pricing control, limiting your Amazon selling to improved resellers, managed product offerings. You decide what's on Amazon, not unknown resellers. Accurate and not duplicative product and brand information. That's a big issue. This all helps to prevent fraudulent products from showing up. Distributors and retailers have one place to go. With direct issues on Amazon, it's going to be you, the brand, or the distributor, whoever's controlling it. We're going to get into the details of how to do all this in just a second. But ultimately, setting the stage here, we believe collectively here that a transparent and thoughtful and well-communicated Amazon policy can help eliminate conflict. And the approach can even vary by, if you have multiple brands, it can vary by brand. We asked LinkedIn, I have about 30,000 followers on LinkedIn. And I asked the question, what is the best way to eliminate channel conflict from Amazon? It's interesting, some of the things we're about to talk about. Number one answer was change selling approach, 38%, eliminate unwanted resellers, 32%, sell different products, 24%. So we're going to talk about this. Only a minority thought they shouldn't sell, which was interesting. So I'm curious what you all think. So we're going to talk about three things now, which is how do you eliminate channel conflict? What are some of the elements in order to eliminate it? And we're going to start talking about, gaining channel control, the legal and organizational foundation. Then I will talk about some business tactics. Michelle, you're going to chime in there, I think, a bit in terms of selling approach, assortment, channel strategy, and then we're going to talk about some tools. So let me turn it over to Kyle now to talk about mitigating channel conflict, the legal foundation. Kyle?
Sure thing. Thanks, Brian. To go back a few slides, when you start to think about, what do you do all about this? You've got your step one is confronting it, acknowledging that there's a problem. And then the step two sort of is diagnosing the issues. How does it happen? I wish there was a simple, answer, it happens because of this, but truth be told, there's a number of reasons why, both internally and externally, that you could be experiencing channel conflict. But what we've most often seen is that it boils down to a failure to protect the supply chain, that being a lack of distributor and reseller agreements, inadequate controls that would allow you to trace to figure out where the products are coming from. And this all in turn leads to unauthorized resellers looking to make an arbitrage. And then within all of that, you have your internal teams, which we're going to talk about a lot today. But what it really boils down to is having, your team buy-in, your executive buy-in, to really understand and confront this issue, and then develop a game plan and execute it as to how to fix it. So to go back a little bit to the legal elements, from my perspective as an attorney, you've got sort of, three fundamental pillars, right? You have your internal policies and your procedures, which also bleeds into the sales team's alignments. You have your reseller and distribution agreements, and then you have the intellectual property. And we're going to go through each one here in short order. So with your internal policies and procedures, the goal here is to achieve the internal alignment and promote team synergy. I know most of you probably have a MAP policy or some sort of retail pricing advertisement restrictions, and those are great. They certainly serve their purpose, but there are a lot of other tools in the tool belt that will help you eliminate channel conflict. One of the easiest ones that I think of is asserting a product identification number on each product, and tracking those products through the supply chain. And then when you notice an unauthorized reseller on Amazon, you can make a strategic test buy to determine where in the supply chain did that product come from. And that's one way to identify the unauthorized resellers. And I think if you think back to a couple of Brian's surveys, one of the main issues is, I see a question there. I'll get to it one moment. Let me finish this train of thought. Um, excuse me. So one of the main issues is identifying who the reseller is. And on the legal side, we can spend a lot of time doing that. But really on the business side, you're probably most apt to figure that out by just having conversations with your distributors, by tracking the products. Brian, I don't know if you want to get to the question that was asked real quick. I can address it. So someone had asked if there was ever a bad strategic time to to implement a MAP policy. I think that really, sort of like if you're not acknowledging Amazon, someone else is. And so with that, the best time is now, right? The best time to plant a tree is today, or the best time to plant a tree was 100 years ago. The second best time is now, sort of that sort of thing, to bring everyone in line and understand what's going on. And really, when we think about MAP policies, you don't want to be setting the sales price. Instead, what the MAP policy does is it has your distributors compete on aspects of the consumer sales transaction that are important to consumers besides price, whether that's the shipping time, whether that's the customer service they may get, whether returns and the shipping costs and returns are refunded. Those things are what you want to promote the competition on, and that's what the MAP policy allows you to do.
There was another question here too, Kyle. How do you recommend tracking unauthorized sellers in case of stickerless commingled inventory? That's a very specific question. I don't know if you have some high-level thoughts on that.
Yeah, so I think what you've got to do is a test buy, and I know that we're going to get to it probably a little bit later, but what you're looking at really is the information that Amazon puts out to you. It's not always accurate. We've found I can go through a number of different stories about the accuracy of the information on Amazon. But it's really, and this is, if you had asked me what my favorite part of my practice is, and maybe I should have been a detective and not an attorney, but it's putting on that hat and pulling these threads and trying to figure out who is selling these products, how they're getting them, who are they affiliated with, who are they related to. And ultimately, at the end of the day, once you're sort of able to put a bullseye on the target, it really facilitates and enhances your ability to go after them.
Excellent. Yeah, Seth Martin had a nice comment here. Thanks, Seth. The only thing worse than not having a MAP policy is having one and not enforcing it. So we'll
Yes.
get into that later. Thanks.
Exactly.
Awesome. Good stuff. All right, let's keep going.
Yep. So your reseller and distributor agreements, they're very important. A lot of people, a lot of brands I've seen sort of gloss over the terms. This is the form we've used for the past decade. This is the form we're going to continue using. But you now have Amazon the disruptor, and it's becoming more and more prevalent. You have other marketplaces that are impacting things. I think the key thing to have in these agreements is number one is making them identify where they are selling the products and how they are selling the products, what you'll see is, somebody, yeah, I'm selling out of my retail shop, but I'm not moving inventory as quickly. So I've also got an Amazon storefront. And you need to know that, right? And then number two, it's some sort of prohibition that prevents one of your distributors from selling the products to somebody that they would reasonably suspect would then sell the products in e-commerce, right? You want to stop the leakages in the supply chain as much as possible. And then we'll get into material differences here in a minute, but really, the five things you want to emphasize to your distributors is that number one, that they've got the correct shipping policies or the preferred shipping policies, the correct storage policies, the correct packaging policies, the correct advertising, and then the correct display policies. That is all aligned for each tier of the supply chain and each sort of branch of the supply chain. That way, there is a unified approach and appearance of the product to the consumer, no matter whether they're going into a mall, or they're going to Walmart or they're going to Amazon. Michelle talked about price erosion. You want to make sure everything is in line, that the consumers are not being confused.
Makes sense. Here we got a comment in here from Adam George. Thanks, Adam. A lot of the advice I found when creating and implementing policies was not to have signed agreements, but to have unilateral policies, which I thought was interesting. It's going to speak, I think, to our next slide.
Yeah. To touch on that while we transition. So there's a big difference between the policy, the unilateral policy, and an agreement. Generally speaking, you want to have the unilateral policies, which have been, confirmed permissible for the past, numerous decades. And those relate to your internet sales policies, your MAP policies, something that, your distributors may acknowledge, may be aware of, but they're not bound to, right? You under the Sherman Act, you cannot fix sales prices yet. But you can sort of unilaterally set the advertised prices.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where that gets into play, is you can't have that conspiracy, that agreement, that combination to restrict trade and or price. But these distributor agreements are a little bit different. They're going to govern, your standard terms. How often do they have to put in a purchase order? What are the payment terms? Is it net 30, net 60, net 90? What happens if, like we have now with tariffs? What happens if there's an unexpected price increase? Do they have to implement it right away, or do they have some lead time? So that's where you have really the differences between those, and each serve a critical role in all of this. But as for an internet sales policy, I think that these should, and this is different from a MAP policy. So this should be a public-facing document that would explain to your consumers, to your unauthorized resellers, to your, retail partners that, hey, unauthorized reselling is an issue. These are the sales channels that are authorized. These are the sales channels that are unauthorized. And be advised, if you're buying through an unauthorized sales channel or an unauthorized reseller, your product, may not come with some of the things that you think it may come with, right? Whether that be a warranty, whether that be, best in class customer service, what have you. But it's sort of that forward-facing document that alerts the people that are interested in your product, knowing sort of what's going on and what they should be on the lookout for.
Got it. Makes sense.
And then sort of to get into the nitty-gritty here, the end goal in all of this is to eliminate the unauthorized resale of products, particularly on Amazon, right? I think contrary to a lot of beliefs about lawsuit, is that enforcement's not based on the sole reason that they're an unauthorized reseller. What it is based on is your intellectual property. So it is very, very important to take the steps necessary to register your trademarks with the USPTO. If you've spent a lot of time, effort, and energy in making catalogs or taking, really, really great and amazing photos, for the listings on Amazon, like I've seen, you're going to want to register those copyrights with the United States Copyright Office to protect them, so that if and when you do want to take action legally, you've got that groundwork already done.
Awesome.
And then, so with that, one of the defenses that we'll see to a trademark infringement lawsuit is the first sale doctrine, right? It's generally permissible for a person to buy a product and then go ahead and resell it. However, they cannot resell materially different products. And that goes back to those five things that I mentioned, your warranties, your shipping, your advertising, the display, the packaging, and the storage of the products. So your material differences can be anything that would separate the product sold from an authorized reseller versus the product sold from an unauthorized reseller. And like I mentioned, we most oftentimes see it with warranties where a brand would not honor a warranty when you have the product being purchased by an unauthorized reseller, which is why when you're going to approve or deny warranties, you want to first check to see, hey, where'd you buy the product? Do you have proof of receipt? Did you receive it as a gift? Can you trace it back to where they purchased it? I think that's the main really important thing in creating a material difference. But I also understand that on the business side of things, you might not want to, you know, put that burden on the consumer. You want to maintain and establish your brand reputation. So that might just not be feasible, which is why you have these other quality controls that become more and more and more important as you make those business considerations down the road.
Got it.
And so while lawsuits may be necessary, there are a number of things that we can do before we get there. The first thing that we can do is send a cease and desist. And it's got to be carefully crafted. It's got to be something that punches and sets the tone, yet also gives them an opportunity to remove the products, right? And what we found is that you can, it's sort of a, I don't know how many listeners here like hunting, but it's sort of, a buckshot versus a bird shot, right? You're sort of spraying the field and seeing what comes down, and then making, business decisions, cost benefit analysis to then target those more sticky resellers that keep popping up. And again, the first way to do that is you got to know who you're going to sue, right? And whether you want to go a DMCA subpoena route, whether you want to search high and large for public records and pull threads like I love doing, or you want to rely on the basic information from Amazon and then, go about it in discovery. There's many different ways to do it. All have different legal risks, all have different costs that I, love to talk to anybody about. But that suffice to say that you can figure out who is selling the product. And most oftentimes we're seeing, especially now, it's not the person that's listed for Amazon. And really, when you serve the defendant with a lawsuit, that defendant, just like you had to make the business decision of whether or not to initiate the lawsuit, that defendant has to make the business decision as to whether or not it's going to be, worth it to them to fight the lawsuit, right? They might be making a $20 arbitrage on a pallet of products they bought. And that $2,000 is not going to be worth it to them. So they'll oftentimes just fold over. That being said, there are instances where you have more sticky resellers out there, and you can usually identify that before you initiate the lawsuit. And just as it's a cost benefit analysis for the defendant, it's a cost benefit analysis to the plaintiff. Where do you want to go? How do you want to take it? But what we've typically seen is once there's been service and it's a traditional, unauthorized reseller on Amazon making a couple of bucks on the arbitrage, that they're wanting to, or they're quick to settle. But I mean, with that, and we just talked about a lot of things. We talked about policies, distribution agreements, your intellectual property, whether or not to file a lawsuit. Those are, your legal teams, those are your sales teams, those are, your operations teams. Everyone's got to be aligned as to how to play this out, right? It's one thing to have a game plan, it's another thing to execute it. And, sending a cease and desist or having a conversation with your sales team so that they can be on the lookout for suspicious purchases. Those are important factors here that all play a critical role. And with that, I think I'll turn it back over to Brian.
Yeah, thanks, Kyle. We just actually got one question here from Noel. Thank you, Noel Felkins. Can you provide feedback on antitrust in relationship to distributor agreements and share some reasons why companies object to setting up distributor agreements? Why wouldn't a company do that?
I mean, I think that they're permissible. I think that there's certain terms you want to avoid. There's certain terms that, are necessary. I think what they're talking more so about is a hub and spoke analysis, right? And I'm happy to have a full conversation about this offline. I don't want to
Yeah.
bore everyone else. But generally speaking, it's going to come down to the benefits for you as a business, right? How problematic are unauthorized resellers?
Right.
What are the other things that are important to you in terms of a distribution agreement? Or are you fine with, a simple invoice and PO process, right? This is sort of a best in class
Yeah.
process or scenario that I've described, but I largely think that you can, assuage the antitrust concerns in any, sophisticated distribution agreement.
Got it.
I'd also say the hesitancy on that is that brands sometimes don't want to have that conversation with, a big reseller,
That's right.
right? There is a little bit of a pain point there, and maybe you were doing things one way for a long time, and now you want to change it, and you're apprehensive to do that. But there are, again, that goes back to the sales team alignment.
Absolutely. No, thank you for your questions, folks. Keep them coming in. We'll get to as many as we can. We have a lot more to share, so we'll keep driving forward. But, this is, we've been talking a lot about the sort of the legal aspects, and there are also business things that can be done. But, one of the things is right here on this slide. You need to have the alignment of the sales team in this process. You as a brand, you have to be willing to enforce your policies and whatever you put in place, and that may include ceasing selling offending resellers, right? So, folks that are selling, including, talking to and managing your large wholesale distributors who might be reselling, as Kyle was mentioning, to other sellers who are selling on Amazon. So that's, there's multiple steps to this, and there's business approaches you can take as well. The commonality, though, it does require executive will at the top to do all of this, right? So you need to have the alignment at the top of your organization. If you don't have alignment and willingness to enforce, it's almost worth not doing. I'm going to highlight a few business tactics to mitigate channel conflict next. So I'll go fairly quickly through this for time's sake, because we have a lot to cover. But 1P is, as I mentioned earlier, is also called Vendor Central. It's a way to sell on Amazon where Amazon buys and resells the product. There's another approach called Seller Central in which you're selling through Amazon. It's also known as 3P or third-party selling. In this model, Amazon never buys the product. They're essentially acting as a middle person, and you're selling through Amazon, not to Amazon, if that makes sense. You can use fulfillment by Amazon to keep your products Prime eligible, etc. But brands are looking in this direction because it provides pricing control, brand control, higher revenue, and profitability. There's a number of advantages to it. It's not going to be available to every company. Some of the larger companies are considered strategic by Amazon, and they insist that you sell it through what they call their Vendor Central or retail program. But, again, this is an option that allows you to obtain better control. It's your storefront, gives you control versus other selling methods. You control the assortment, inventory, price, brand content, and it's also typically more profitable. Some companies, don't talk to Amazon about this, but folks at Amazon, but hybrid programs, you guys have talked about them sometimes as being possible, other times as not. But we know that they exist in the market. We have clients running them in some cases. And so hybrid programs, you can run these across, different selling models. As long as they're different products in Amazon, you can potentially do a hybrid program. And, I like to use Ron's quote here. I'll just read this for you. He's the director of marketing at Dynabraid, or was until recently. The Amazon 3P approach is a slam dunk, helped us to better communicate with our distributors, deepen relationships, become more strategic. We should have done this 5 years ago, meaning proactively control and sell on Amazon and gain control of the channel. So this is one example. We'll share some more case studies a little later. If you are using the Seller Central approach, you need a pricing strategy, and retail pricing can be set when you're using this approach. You have to consider multiple factors. Obviously, channel conflict. You need to be mindful of your other distribution and retail channels that are selling products in the market. You don't want to be, I shared some compelling economics earlier. You don't want to be undercutting your other channels. You want to respect the value that your product commands while also being in line with your other channels and not just undercutting them. But you also still need to be competitive versus other brands. Too often we'll find brands put products on Amazon and say, oh, because it's Amazon, I can charge 3x what I charge in other channels. No, that doesn't work. So your product commands what it commands in the marketplace. It can be a great product. This isn't just about cheap products, but you have to be mindful of what a buyer will pay, consumer or B2B buyer on Amazon. Amazon Business offers tools for bulk and tiered pricing that are available behind the Amazon Business login. So as we think about channel conflict and making sure you're mindful of your pricing to B2B customers, the Amazon business pricing shows up only behind a login, just like if you're selling on a Grainger or Ferguson or something else where the distributor's customer has to log in to see the price. Same thing on Amazon. Amazon has something called ASB, Amazon Standards for Brands. And inside of Amazon Standards for Brands, they have a price competitive test. So we have to be mindful of that, and we don't have time to go into it today, but it's a policy you need to be aware of. And then cleaning up the channel will allow you to take control. So this isn't about set it and forget it. Pricing requires ongoing monitoring, competitor products, ensure relative positioning, etc. Testing, learning is required. The other approach that companies take is assortment variation and strategies. On Amazon, this is an interesting statistic. On Amazon, would you buy from brands or sellers you never heard of? 65% of respondents to the survey by Digital Commerce 360 said yes. What does that mean? It means that a private label, alternative brands, new brands can be introduced into Amazon and sold if they're done well. And that can avoid channel conflict because you're basically showing a different product. You can also vary the product line by who's selling it. You can give authorized resellers some products to sell while you maintain others in the marketplace. And B2B relevant products can be limited only to be shown to Amazon business customers. So if you have a product, if you're a medical device manufacturer selling class 2 or class 3 medical devices, it can only be bought by licensed healthcare professionals. You can make them available, for example, just to those folks behind the Amazon business login. And so that just doesn't apply to those kinds of products. Any product that's B2B relevant can apply to. We recommend an authorized for Amazon program. What is that? I mean, Kyle alluded to elements of this. This typically involves a combination of direct selling on Amazon and then selling with authorized resellers, where you're setting a set of specific requirements that those resellers must adhere to. So if someone's going to be authorized on Amazon, this can go, Kyle, right into that distribution agreement. Minimum stock position held, active support of the value proposition from the manufacturer, channel diversity, not just selling on Amazon, demonstrated capability to provide post-purchase support, installation, service, commitment to advertising products, agreement to comply with MAP, demonstrated Amazon capability, Amazon seller rating. They need to maintain a certain seller rating. So a number of criteria that you can put in place to ensure that the resellers that are selling your products are in fact going to represent your brand well and maintain some level of pricing integrity and not cause channel conflict. So I'm going to turn it over to Michelle now to talk about a few tools to enable channel management. And again, this is all available later, guys. I know we're going fast. So Michelle?
Thank you. So a lot of people ask us about brand registry, and while brand registry definitely has its place, what brand registry is not designed to do is to prevent other sellers from selling your product, even if you're a brand owner and you have them authorized as a reseller. So it is not Amazon's job to control your channels of distribution. They will say that over and over again. It is your job to control your channels of distribution. And if your product shows up on Amazon, brand registry is not the way to get rid of them. Doesn't block sellers. Amazon brand registry is not brand gating. Gating kind of does exist, like for unicorns. And it's a really complicated process that very few brands actually achieve. The requirements are strict, and yet the details are somewhat fuzzy. What brand registry is, it's a great ACE and merge research and execution tool. It does help to present the brand's content first. It gives you access to A+ content, and it gives you access to build a brand store. That's what it is.
Awesome.
A lot of folks ask us about transparency as well. And is transparency a way to control the channel? And I have heard a lot of horror stories about people trying to use transparency in order to remove unauthorized sellers from Amazon. So this is Amazon's own marketing material. You enroll your product in transparency, you apply transparency codes to all of your products, and then Amazon scans the codes to ensure that only authentic units are shipped to customers. And that's the key word, right? It's authentic. This is a program for counterfeit detection. The last piece in here is other retailers. Customers can use their transparency app to authenticate units regardless of where they are purchased. So we have a lot of people say, well, I'm going to use transparency and I'm only going to put it on items that I ship into Amazon's DCs. That is a really great way for you to spend 1 to 5 cents per unit for stickers, apply them to your products, and then have your product removed from the program. If Amazon finds that a lot of authentic products are coming in without a transparency sticker, your item's unenrolled and you lose the money that you invested in those stickers. So can it solve channel conflict? No, it creates a false sense of security for sure. This I actually took from some products that I purchased. So I downloaded the transparency app just so you can all see what it looks like. I scanned the QR code and then it gives you a green check mark. It's exactly what it shows on the consumer side. Your product is check, and then it gives you some information. So I would venture to guess that the majority of consumers don't even know what the QR codes on the back of the products are for. And most of them don't have the transparency app downloaded. Monitoring tools are critical to your success. So you need monitoring tools that help to monitor websites beyond just Amazon. You also need to be looking at eBay. If you didn't know, eBay recently partnered with Facebook, and now you can see eBay listings on Facebook Marketplace. So that's a growing marketplace that people forget about often. Walmart has an open marketplace, Google Shopping. You need something that provides solutions that are tailored to you and your revenue goals and how you enforce on your brand. So you need something that delivers clear, actionable data.
And I'll tell you firsthand, Michelle, trying to track things manually is very difficult, if not impossible. Trying to track what's happening on these marketplaces, looking at your resellers, you won't catch them all. There's too many of them.
And especially if you're only looking at Amazon, you're only looking at a very small portion of the picture.
Yep.
So you need something that's automated, something with customizable workflows. You can segment, you can use if the seller is authorized, then take this action. If the seller is not authorized, then take this action. And you want to be able to gather and store all of those records and documentation in case you were to need to hand it over to Kyle for some legal compliance. And then actionable data for sales growth. We have real-time information on resellers. We collect contact and identification for those sellers. We do test purchases. I have a whole team of investigators that look into just the identity of third-party resellers.
And that's one of the biggest values, Michelle. My goodness, you have a database of millions of these sellers, I think, and that's one of the hardest things, right, Kyle? I mean, just tracking these people down and figuring out what's going on. So good, that's really good stuff, and it's a huge value.
So in a marketplace that accounts for almost 50% of all e-commerce sales, which is Amazon, you want to make sure that you're regaining your control. So that you're going to need maximum visibility into all of that crucial buy box data, who's running it. The inventory is really important. And that is, David, to answer your question that I see popped up, how do I recommend that a brand approve authorized backup resellers and block others? I would start to look, first of all, at their inventory positions, their seller ratings, some of the things that Brian mentioned earlier. That's how I would choose those that I approve. And then the others, it's a process to remove them. And that's where those reseller policies come in and the enforcement of those policies all the way up to and including lawsuits.
Mm-hmm.
But all of those things, when you put that whole puzzle together, gives you increased revenue back into your pocket because you're changing the way that those margins are for the brand and the way that the brand is sold. I think this is Kyle.
Or I can jump in on this, and we guys can kind of talk through it, I think. But the enforcement, so we said this earlier, and Kyle chime in here too. But enforcement is critical. If you're not willing to enforce or able to enforce these policies and procedures, it's not going to be effective. And when we help a client think through and execute these programs, number one, we start with communication to the channel, and the sales team alignment is critical here. When we inventory using like a TrackStreet, Michelle, like your solution, we can then identify if some of those resellers are high value add or not. And if they are, and if you have an existing relationship, you can start by notifying those sellers through the sales team. But there's other steps that can be taken. Amazon actions. So there's some things that can be done, not a lot, to Michelle's point, but some things that can be done in brand registry. There's email notifications that in the case of TrackStreet, you automate those, right, Michelle? Email notifications, please remove your listings. Then, you engage legal, like, Kyle's team at KJK to issue cease and desist letters, consider terminating selling relationships up to the point of lawsuits, which aren't that scary, folks. Everyone gets, they hear lawsuit and you hear millions of dollars. It's not the case here. Most people, as Kyle said, will drop their listings once they, once they receive a notification. But you have to set an example for the market, as Michelle will tell you, right? These resellers all talk to each other on forums and other places. And so it's important to set an example in the market. You're willing to do this, and then internal controls. Anything you want to add to that, Kyle?
I'll piggyback just real quick on what you said about it being important to send the message to the market.
Mhm.
So a lawsuit, cease and desist, what have you, it sends the message to the marketplace. It sends the message to the unauthorized resellers that, oh, look, these guys have sued before. I might get sued. I don't want that to happen. And that's critical, right? But it also sends a message to your partners, to your authorized resellers that, look, we understand that this is an issue, that this conflict is being created. We're doing our best to figure it out, to fix it, to eliminate it. And I think that that carries a lot of weight, when you go to renegotiate the sales contracts, when you go to think about, where the display is going to be located in the footprint of the store or how they're going to advertise you online. You want to maintain and promote that relationship as best as possible.
Awesome. Is it possible to eliminate all resellers on Amazon? Karis Woodall, thank you for that question. My experience is, as we look at things like case studies like this one, grasshopper mower, it's generally not possible to eliminate everyone, but it's possible to get it under a high degree of control, being reflected back in your, for example, your buy box win rate, the amount of share you're getting on Amazon of your sales being in the 95% range. Grasshopper lawnmower, we help them eliminate a lot of resellers, enable channels, recapture market share, drive incremental sales, by the way, from Amazon, B2B and B2C, recapture sales from other brands. So and eliminate channel conflict. And guess what? No complaints from their dealers. Do you guys have any thoughts on that question? Is it possible to eliminate all resellers from Amazon?
I agree that it's not possible to eliminate all of them. I think really knowing where your distribution leaks are and having a policy that you enforce, that's the key word. Like if you have a policy but you don't enforce it, then why have a policy? I agree with that wholeheartedly. But there's always going to be weird little leaks and things are going to pop up and go away and pop back up. So I don't think that it's possible to get to zero, but it's possible to get really close most of the time.
There's going to be somebody out there who's always going to go to Costco and buy a 3 for 2 and turn around and try to sell the third. That being said, if that's your only headache on Amazon is things like that, we're doing a great job, right?
Yeah, absolutely. You guys had some case studies. About 2 minutes left here, and thank you for all your questions, guys. Hinckley, do you want to talk to this one?
I mean, yeah, this is a pretty standard thing that we came across. There was a pretty sticky reseller out there that for the most part we had trouble identifying. We used the DMCA process. Ultimately, we brought a lawsuit, and they caved pretty quickly. It was a very, very big win for the business because this has been a thorn in their side for quite some time.
Excellent. And then Grizzly, Michelle, anything you want to highlight here briefly?
Yeah, we were able to help them achieve a 95% reduction in MAP pricing violations. They saved 14 plus hours a week. Again, it's really hard to do this
Yeah.
manually. So
Yes.
having a tool is
Yeah.
incredibly helpful, and 60% increase in sales at brick and mortar retailers, which for the pet industry, there's a lot of mom and pop shops out there that pet parents want to walk in and purchase their goods. And a lot of these pet brands really want that to still continue to happen for those independent retailers.
That's awesome. Well, as we wrap up here, guys, just a couple of things. Really, I'll direct your attention to the three elements in the middle here: legal foundation, the right business approach, and management tools and enforcement. Success is attainable, but it takes time. That's one of the things that I think all of us want to remind you. This isn't an overnight thing. It can take 6, 9, 12 months to get this under control. And there's a number of best practices here. So we're all here and willing to help you. We have an Amazon channel control assessment that we offer at Enceiba, which includes a situation analysis, reseller inventory evaluation, reseller authorization criteria development, a business case, and recommended channel control plan. Reach out to me if you're interested in that. We do that on a fixed price basis. TrackStreet, Michelle, you were going to offer some complimentary analysis to folks.
Yeah, we would, if you want to give us 10 of your UPCs, we would be happy to set up a demo account and show you who's selling your products, where, and for how much.
Awesome. And then Kyle, you wanted to offer the group something as well.
Sure thing. Yeah. KGK, we're willing to take a look at your IP, see if the right foundation's there, take a look at your resale agreements, see what we got going on, recommend some ways that we can help. And yeah, shoot me over an email and we can get it rolling.
Awesome. And here's all of our information for those of you. We've done Q&A throughout. We're just up on time here, so appreciate you all. If you want to copy the presentation, you can email me. We will send this out along with the recording within the next few days, probably early next week. But appreciate everyone joining us today. We had a great group here. Thank you again, Kyle and Michelle. Great job today. And we'll see you on our next webinar. Keep your eyes open for our next webinar, which will be in probably so make sure you're on our email list. But thank you, everyone, and we'll see you on a future webinar.
Yes,
Thank
thanks.
you.